New tonight in the investigation of the University of Idaho student murders. We're learning about the items that investigators took from Bryan Kohberger's parents' home in Pennsylvania, as well as the items seized from his car.
When police finally obtained Bryan Kohberger's 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, it was expected to yield significant forensic evidence. Investigators anticipated traces of blood, hair, fibers, or other DNA markers that could directly link the vehicle to the November 13, 2022 quadruple homicide at the King Road residence in Moscow, Idaho. Cameras had recorded a white car circling the neighborhood multiple times in the early morning hours, making it a focal point of the investigation. Despite these expectations, the car's interior was found almost entirely devoid of evidence. Swabs from the pedals, door handles, and upholstery returned either negative results or inconclusive partial DNA markers. The interior had been meticulously cleaned, with seats and carpets removed and restored, creating a paradox. A vehicle directly associated with a violent crime appeared sterile. Could this absence indicate deliberate counter-forensic measures? Or might it reflect a coincidence, reflecting unusually thorough cleaning unrelated to the events of November 13th? Combined with cell phone inactivity between 2:47 a.m. and 4:48 a.m., the timing of the vehicle's movement on surveillance, and Kohberger's academic background in criminology, a pattern emerges of intentional avoidance of trace evidence. It is possible the vehicle was systematically sanitized to minimize forensic detection. This might reflect an understanding of evidence collection principles,
as well as what they seized from the white Elantra. And while some items like a black mask and gloves might make more sense than a drawing that was also taken as evidence, a former FBI agent I spoke with tells me all evidence is important to understand how and why someone could have committed such a crime.
What do you think? Does the spotless interior suggest planning, or is it an anomaly in the investigation? When law enforcement officers arrived to secure Bryan Kohberger's 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, they approached the vehicle as a primary locus of physical evidence for the quadruple homicide committed on November 13, 2022, at the King Road residence in Moscow, Idaho. Forensic protocols dictate that any vehicle associated with violent crime, particularly a stabbing of 4 individuals in their home, is treated as a potential repository of biological, trace, and contact evidence. Standard operating procedures for such investigations, as outlined by the FBI and state forensic guidelines, prioritize collection of DNA, hair, fibers, and any particulate matter transferred during the commission of the offense. Officers anticipated that the car's interior, particularly the driver's seat, floor mats, gas and brake pedals, and door handles, could yield crucial biological material, given the intimate and violent nature of the attacks. The murders involved direct stabbing, an act which typically disperses blood in a manner that is difficult to fully contain, potentially aerosolizing trace amounts across the assailant's clothing and any immediate transportation medium. In addition to biological evidence, law enforcement expected to locate fibers from bedding, carpeting, or clothing from the victims, which could have adhered to the perpetrator through incidental contact, consistent with Locard's exchange principle. This principle, a foundational tenet of forensic science, asserts that every interaction leaves a trace, and it has historically guided investigators in assessing the evidentiary value of vehicles implicated in violent crime. Contrary to these expectations, initial forensic reports indicated an absence of biological and trace evidence in the Elantra. Swabs taken from high contact areas, including the steering wheel, gear shift, pedals, door handles, seat belts, and upholstery, returned negative results or partial DNA markers insufficient to establish a unique match to the victims. Carpet fibers and any visible hair were either not present or considered insufficiently specific to link to the King Road residence. This presented a contradiction to conventional investigative assumptions, in which vehicles transporting individuals who had committed violent acts frequently retain a measurable presence of blood, hair, or other trace evidence. Furthermore, specialized forensic analyses of the pedals and floor mats, which had been preserved and later transported to the Idaho State Lab, failed to detect the expected mixture of human DNA. The meticulous removal of seats and headrests prior to analysis, intended to prevent contamination and preserve potential trace evidence, revealed a vehicle that was strikingly uniform in its cleanliness. Investigators noted that even minimal contamination from routine use was absent, creating a scenario atypical for a car of its model year, mileage, and previous ownership history. This deviation from anticipated findings challenged standard evidentiary assumptions and prompted a reevaluation of investigative priorities. Could the absence of trace evidence in the vehicle reflect deliberate counter-forensic measures, or might it result from routine cleaning and maintenance unrelated to the November 13th murders? Is it possible that the observed lack of contamination reflects methodological limitations, such as swabbing techniques or environmental degradation, rather than the deliberate action of an individual? Given that the vehicle was registered to a PhD student in criminology, could knowledge of forensic practices have influenced the observed condition? Alternatively, might the vehicle have been sanitized prior to the investigation for reasons unrelated to criminal activity, such as personal hygiene or sale preparation? These questions framed the investigative approach, requiring law enforcement to integrate physical inspection with digital, behavioral, and circumstantial evidence. The inconsistencies between expected and observed evidence demanded careful scrutiny and compelled prosecutors to consider indirect forms of evidence, including digital activity and observed behavioral patterns. Examination of the investigative timeline revealed a pattern indicative of conscious efforts to minimize or eliminate traces. Surveillance footage captured the white Elantra arriving near the King Road residence during the pre-dawn hours and departing shortly thereafter, consistent with an efficient ingress and exit strategy. Cell phone data showed that the registered phone for the vehicle's owner, Bryan Kohberger, ceased communication with network towers from 2:47 a.m. to 4:48 a.m., encompassing the estimated time of the murders. This temporal window aligns with the temporal window in which the vehicle was observed on camera, suggesting coordination between vehicle operation and cellular activity. Forensic reports further indicated that seats had been removed and interior panels accessed in a manner consistent with knowledge of potential evidence accumulation points. The observed pattern suggests a deliberate attempt to avoid deposition of biological or trace materials, potentially reflecting an understanding of forensic detection methods, including the importance of DNA, hair, and fiber collection in linking suspects to crime scenes.
It is possible that the Elantra was intentionally sanitized to limit the deposition of incriminating biological and trace evidence. The thorough cleaning of seats, carpets, pedals, and other surfaces, coupled with the absence of incidental contamination, could indicate a deliberate effort to interfere with forensic analysis. This might reflect specialized knowledge regarding the locations where evidence is likely to accumulate, the effectiveness of particular cleaning methods, and the sequencing required to ensure minimal residual traces. The combination of observed vehicle movements, digital activity, and the physical condition of the car makes it plausible that the sanitization was conducted in advance of or immediately following the commission of the crime. It is also possible that the observed cleanliness was enhanced by mechanical or chemical means designed to degrade biological material, although no specific chemical residues were confirmed. The pattern of action may suggest a high level of premeditation in which the potential for forensic detection was anticipated and addressed systematically. However, alternative theories exist. The lack of trace evidence might reflect coincidence, limitations in sampling, or degradation of biological material in situ due to environmental factors and cannot, in isolation, conclusively establish intent. Theories should therefore be constructed with cautious language, emphasizing likelihoods rather than certainties. The expected areas for forensic collection included the steering wheel, gear shift, gas and brake pedals, door handles, seat belts, headrests, carpeting, and upholstery. Swabs from these areas were systematically taken and preserved under chain of custody protocols to prevent contamination. Photographic documentation prior to removal of components confirmed the vehicle's condition at the time of seizure.
No visible bloodstains, hairs, or fibers consistent with the King Road residence were observed. Forensic teams noted that even minor dust accumulation, which is typically present in vehicles with regular use, was absent in areas of potential evidence deposition. In contrast, minor external dust was observed on the vehicle's exterior, but this did not provide evidentiary linkage to the murders. Investigators also considered the potential contribution of footwear, gloves, and other implements in transferring trace evidence into the vehicle. The absence of such indicators reinforced the anomaly presented by the interior's condition. The observed absence of evidence contradicts fundamental expectations derived from empirical data in violent crime vehicle analysis. In prior cases involving stabbing or other close contact assaults, the interior of a suspect vehicle frequently retains some combination of blood spatter, hair, fibers from clothing, and other trace matter. The failure to recover such evidence in the Elantra raises questions regarding either procedural integrity or deliberate countermeasures. Law enforcement assessed that the cleaning observed could not be reasonably explained by standard car maintenance or coincidental absence of contamination. The contradiction between empirical expectation and observed result necessitated incorporation of alternative investigative strategies, including reliance on cell phone location data, witness accounts, and circumstantial evidence. Investigation of Kohberger's movements in conjunction with vehicle usage highlighted a repeated behavior suggestive of calculated avoidance of traceable evidence. Travel records indicate that the white Elantra was parked and monitored during intervals in which cellular data indicated the owner's presence or absence. Reports from surveillance over the subsequent weeks documented meticulous attention to the vehicle's interior, including cleaning with gloves, potential removal of debris, and disposal of items associated with transportation or evidence collection. These observed behaviors, when contextualized with the empty vehicle interior, establish a pattern consistent with premeditated efforts to interfere with evidence preservation. It is possible that Kohberger, by virtue of academic exposure to criminal justice and criminology methodologies, applied knowledge of forensic countermeasures in a practical context. This might include awareness of how to prevent deposition of trace evidence, how to degrade DNA using chemical or mechanical means, and the sequencing required to minimize detection of particulate matter. While the hypothesis cannot be confirmed without direct observation of the actions, the confluence of clean interior, strategic vehicle movement, and digital silence supports the likelihood of intentional action. Alternatively, it remains possible that standard environmental or maintenance factors contributed to the absence of trace evidence, although the probability of a completely sterile interior in a previously used 2015 vehicle is significantly lower than the probability of deliberate action. Investigators also collected peripheral evidence from the vehicle, including tire iron, shovel, hiking boots, goggles, reflective vest, and Ziploc bags, which were preserved in accordance with chain of custody protocols. These items, while common in outdoor or mechanical work, were considered potentially relevant in evaluating theories of concealment or counter-forensic activity. Their presence, coupled with the interior's condition, contributed to a narrative framework that could be presented to a jury in assessing consciousness of guilt or methodical planning. No evidence directly connected these items to the act of murder. Their relevance remains circumstantial, pending further corroboration. Given the absence of primary forensic evidence, could a jury reasonably interpret the combination of a sterile vehicle and peripheral items as indicative of premeditated effort to avoid detection? How might alternative explanations, such as environmental degradation, procedural limitations, or coincidental absence of contamination, be weighed against the theory of deliberate action? Does the contextual pattern of behavior, vehicle movement, digital inactivity, and meticulous cleaning strengthen the inference of intentionality or remain speculative without direct observation? Observers are invited to consider whether the expected evidence or its absence serves as a valid indicator of planning and forethought. What do you think? Does the clean interior suggest deliberate avoidance of forensic detection, or could it represent an anomaly in standard investigative expectations? When forensic teams completed the examination of Bryan Kohberger's 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, the most consequential finding was not a trace recovered, but a condition documented. The interior of the vehicle presented as forensically minimal to an extent that investigators characterized it as anomalous for a car of its age and use. Seats had been removed and reinstalled, interior panels accessed, carpeting lifted, and high-contact surfaces addressed. Swabs collected from the steering wheel, gear selector, seat belts, door handles, pedals, and floor coverings yielded either negative results or partial DNA markers that did not reach an evidentiary threshold for attribution. No visible blood staining, hairs, or fibers uniquely consistent with the King Road residence were identified. Forensic teams noted that even minor dust accumulation, which is typically present in vehicles with regular use, was absent in areas of potential evidence deposition. In contrast, minor external dust was observed on the vehicle's exterior, but this did not provide evidentiary linkage to the murders. Investigators also considered the potential contribution of footwear, gloves, and other implements in transferring trace evidence into the vehicle. The absence of such indicators reinforced the anomaly presented by the interior's condition. The observed absence of evidence contradicts fundamental expectations derived from empirical data in violent crime vehicle analysis. In prior cases involving stabbing or other close contact assaults, the interior of a suspect vehicle frequently retains some combination of blood spatter, hair, fibers from clothing, and other trace matter. The failure to recover such evidence in the Elantra raises questions regarding either procedural integrity or deliberate countermeasures. Law enforcement assessed that the cleaning observed could not be reasonably explained by standard car maintenance or coincidental absence of contamination. The contradiction between empirical expectation and observed result necessitated incorporation of alternative investigative strategies, including reliance on cell phone location data, witness accounts, and circumstantial evidence. Investigation of Kohberger's movements in conjunction with vehicle usage highlighted a repeated behavior suggestive of calculated avoidance of traceable evidence. Travel records indicate that the white Elantra was parked and monitored during intervals in which cellular data indicated the owner's presence or absence. Reports from surveillance over the subsequent weeks documented meticulous attention to the vehicle's interior, including cleaning with gloves, potential removal of debris, and disposal of items associated with transportation or evidence collection. These observed behaviors, when contextualized with the empty vehicle interior, establish a pattern consistent with premeditated efforts to interfere with evidence preservation. It is possible that Kohberger, by virtue of academic exposure to criminal justice and criminology methodologies, applied knowledge of forensic countermeasures in a practical context. This might include awareness of how to prevent deposition of trace evidence, how to degrade DNA using chemical or mechanical means, and the sequencing required to minimize detection of particulate matter. While the hypothesis cannot be confirmed without direct observation of the actions, the confluence of clean interior, strategic vehicle movement, and digital silence supports the likelihood.
This outcome conflicted with established expectations for a vehicle temporally and geographically associated with a close-contact homicide involving sharp force injuries. In comparable investigations, even extensive post-event cleaning often leaves recoverable material in seams, under seats, within foam cushions, or along pedal assemblies. Blood, in particular, is known to persist microscopically despite routine sanitation. The contradiction lay in the uniformity of the absence. Investigators did not encounter a mixed pattern of residual findings, which might suggest partial or inconsistent cleaning. Instead, they documented a broad forensic vacuum. This stood in tension with the contemporaneous evidence that placed a white Elantra in proximity to the crime scene during the relevant time window, and with digital records that placed the registered owner's phone offline during that same period. The absence, therefore, did not resolve uncertainty, it introduced it. How does a vehicle linked by surveillance and timing to a violent event present without recoverable trace? Could the lack of biological material reflect an unusually effective cleaning process? Might it indicate the use of protective measures that limited transfer from the outset? Is it possible that sampling limitations, environmental degradation, or laboratory thresholds account for the findings? Or does the condition of the interior itself constitute an evidentiary signal independent of recovered material? When the vehicle findings are set alongside other documented behaviors, a pattern emerges that investigators considered relevant. Surveillance footage showed repeated passes by a white sedan near the King Road residence before and after the estimated time of the homicides. Cell phone records indicated a cessation of network communication from 2:47 a.m. until 4:48 a.m., followed by reactivation south of Moscow, Idaho. Travel routes inferred from camera data suggested avoidance of primary roadways during the return trip. Subsequent observations, reported in public filings, described attention to cleaning and handling of the vehicle over the following weeks. The interior configuration, including removed components, aligned with known evidence collection priorities taught in criminology and forensic science programs. The pattern did not rely on a single data point, but on convergence, movement, timing, and condition. Prosecutors later articulated the significance of the vehicle condition during court proceedings, emphasizing that the expectation of a treasure trove of DNA was unmet. The description presented was not of a casually maintained car, but of one addressed at locations an average owner would not typically access. The removal of seats and the attention to pedals were highlighted because those areas are known repositories for trace transfer. The absence of ordinary debris, such as dust accumulation and routine detritus, further distinguished the interior from baseline conditions observed in vehicles of similar age. These observations were supported by photographic documentation and testimony regarding standard forensic expectations. At the same time, the absence of recovered biological evidence limited the probative value of the vehicle in isolation. No laboratory report concluded that DNA had been conclusively destroyed, nor did any analysis establish the specific methods used to achieve the observed condition. Without chemical residue confirmation, investigators could not state that particular agents were applied. The contradiction persisted. A vehicle associated circumstantially with a violent event presented without the material traces typically relied upon to establish direct linkage. Does a forensic void function as evidence, or does it represent an absence that must be filled by other forms of proof? How should fact-finders weigh a condition that appears deliberate but is not by itself illegal or uniquely incriminating? Where is the boundary between inference and speculation when material evidence is missing? Investigators contextualized the vehicle findings within a broader evidentiary mosaic. The knife sheath recovered at the King Road scene contained a single-source male DNA profile on the snap, later associated through genealogical methods with the Kohberger family. Cell phone data demonstrated repeated late-night presence near the residence in the months preceding the homicides. Video evidence tracked the movement of a white Elantra consistent with the defendant's registered vehicle. Within this pattern, the car's condition assumed interpretive weight, not as proof of presence, but as an indicator of post-event conduct. The pattern suggested a sequence: proximity, digital silence, movement, and subsequent sanitization. Based on the documented facts, it is possible that the vehicle was intentionally prepared or treated in a manner designed to minimize forensic transfer and retention. This could include the use of protective coverings, clothing, or gloves during vehicle operation, followed by systematic cleaning focused on high-risk areas. It might reflect an understanding of where investigators are most likely to collect samples and how trace evidence persists. Given the registered owner's academic background in criminology and forensic science programs, it is plausible that general knowledge of forensic processes informed these actions. Alternatively, it remains possible that the absence resulted from a combination of factors, including limited transfer during the event, environmental degradation, and the inherent constraints of sampling and laboratory thresholds. The theory does not require certainty regarding method. It rests on the likelihood that the condition was not incidental. Items seized from the vehicle and associated locations included gloves, bags, and tools that, while not illegal, were considered relevant to assessing potential counter-forensic behavior. No item recovered from the vehicle was conclusively linked to the act of homicide. Their significance lay in context rather than direct evidentiary value. The forensic analysis did not establish a unique match between any recovered trace and the victims. These limitations were acknowledged in filings and public statements. The same absence that suggested deliberate action also constrained prosecutorial argument. Without blood, hair, or fibers, the vehicle could not independently establish guilt. Defense challenges emphasized the lack of direct physical linkage and the possibility of alternative explanations. The contradiction underscored the dependence of the case on cumulative inference rather than singular forensic discovery.
Can a jury reasonably infer intent from absence when supported by converging circumstantial evidence? Or does the lack of material findings undermine the probative value of the vehicle altogether? How should uncertainty be weighed when patterns suggest deliberation, but proof remains indirect? The investigative response treated the forensic void not as an endpoint but as a pivot. Resources were redirected to corroborative domains: digital records, surveillance mapping, witness statements, and genealogical analysis. Within this framework, the vehicle's condition became the central interpretive element, informing how other evidence was read rather than standing alone. It is likely that investigators viewed the Elantra's interior as a behavioral artifact. The theory holds that post-event conduct can reflect consciousness of risk, even when material evidence is absent. This interpretation does not assert commission of the crime by the condition alone. It suggests that the manner in which the vehicle was addressed is consistent with an effort to manage evidentiary exposure. Competing explanations remain viable, and the theory relies on probability rather than certainty. Considering the documented absence of recoverable evidence and the surrounding pattern of behavior, what do you think the forensic void represents? A deliberate countermeasure, an investigative limitation, or an anomaly without clear meaning? Bryan Kohberger was enrolled as a doctoral student in criminology at Washington State University at the time of the November 13, 2022 homicides in Moscow, Idaho. His academic focus placed him in direct contact with theories of criminal behavior, investigative methods, and forensic evidence handling. Public court statements later referenced coursework and written material addressing crime scene processing and offender behavior. This educational background is not disputed and was documented through university records and prosecutorial filings. Investigators also documented post-event behavior that included extensive cleaning of personal spaces and attention to potential sources of trace evidence, including the interior of the 2015 white Hyundai Elantra associated with him. These actions were observed or inferred through surveillance, search warrant returns, and testimony. Academic study of criminology is not indicative of criminal intent, nor does it establish predisposition toward violent conduct. Thousands of students engage with forensic theory without engaging in criminal behavior. The contradiction arises when specialized knowledge coincides with actions that appear aligned with counter-forensic objectives. Cleaning a vehicle or residence is not inherently suspicious, and meticulous habits can reflect personality traits unrelated to wrongdoing. The challenge for investigators was distinguishing between ordinary conduct informed by education and conduct suggestive of an attempt to mitigate evidentiary exposure. The educational background alone could not resolve this distinction. How should specialized knowledge be weighed when evaluating post-event behavior? Does familiarity with forensic principles increase the likelihood that certain actions were intentional rather than incidental? Or does the attribution of motive risk conflating education with intent, thereby overstating the significance of routine activities? Investigators identified a sequence of behaviors that, when viewed collectively, formed a pattern they considered relevant. This included the documented digital silence of a cell phone during the estimated time of the homicides, indirect travel routes following the event, and the subsequent condition of the vehicle and living spaces. The pattern was not limited to a single act of cleaning, but extended to attention directed at areas commonly targeted during forensic examinations. Observations at a later date included the use of gloves during trash disposal and the segregation of refuse. These behaviors, while individually explainable, were interpreted in relation to the subject's academic exposure to investigative techniques. The pattern suggested a convergence between knowledge and action. Prosecutorial arguments referenced the concept of Locard's exchange principle, a foundational forensic theory stating that contact between two objects results in mutual transfer. This principle is widely taught in criminology programs and is central to understanding trace evidence. The absence of such evidence in the vehicle, coupled with the methodical nature of its interior condition, was presented as inconsistent with normal use. The argument did not assert certainty regarding the methods employed, but emphasized the alignment between known investigative priorities and areas addressed within the vehicle. Despite these interpretations, no direct evidence established that specific forensic countermeasures were employed. No chemical residues were conclusively identified, and no documentation proved the timing or motivation behind the cleaning. The contradiction persisted between inference drawn from alignment and the lack of direct proof of intent. Defense filings emphasized this gap, noting that knowledge of forensic theory does not equate to its application in criminal contexts. Is it reasonable to infer psychological motive from circumstantial alignment alone? At what point does pattern recognition risk becoming confirmation bias, particularly when the subject's education overlaps with investigative focus? The pattern extended beyond physical cleaning to behavioral indicators interpreted as risk awareness. The reported turning off of a cell phone during a critical window, followed by reactivation after departure from the area, mirrored common advisories regarding digital tracking avoidance. Indirect routing away from primary highways corresponded with known camera coverage patterns. These behaviors, while not illegal, were evaluated against the backdrop of criminological training that emphasizes awareness of surveillance and data trails. The pattern was cumulative, relying on temporal proximity and behavioral consistency rather than singular acts. Based on the available facts, it is possible that the subject's academic exposure influenced his perception of risk awareness. This could have resulted in heightened sensitivity to trace evidence and surveillance rather than a spontaneous reaction. The theory suggests that knowledge might shape behavior by informing what actions are perceived as necessary to reduce exposure. This does not establish commission of a crime. It proposes that if involved, the subject would be more likely than an average individual to address specific evidentiary vulnerabilities. Alternatively, it remains possible that the behaviors reflect generalized anxiety or conscientiousness amplified by awareness of investigative processes following widespread media coverage.
Emotional references by prosecutors characterizing the subject as someone who had studied crime and possessed a knowledge skill set. These statements were framed to contextualize behavior rather than to assert predisposition. No evidence was presented that academic work advocated or simulated violent conduct. The relevance lay in the application of knowledge after the fact, not in its acquisition. The reliance on psychological interpretation introduces uncertainty. Psychological inference cannot substitute for physical proof, and courts traditionally caution against attributing intent based solely on demeanor or background. The contradiction highlights the tension between narrative coherence and evidentiary rigor. Without corroboration, psychological theories remain interpretive rather than determinative.
Should psychological insight serve as a supporting lens or as a central pillar in evaluating evidence? How should jurors differentiate between plausible inference and speculative attribution when expert knowledge intersects with alleged conduct? The prosecution's narrative positioned the subject's education as a contextual amplifier rather than a causal factor. The pattern emphasized sequence, exposure to theory, occurrence of the event, and subsequent behavior consistent with that theory. The defense countered by isolating each behavior and offering benign explanations. The pattern thus became contested terrain, dependent on whether cumulative interpretation was accepted. It is likely that investigators considered the possibility of hubris, defined as overconfidence in one's understanding of systems and processes. In criminological contexts, such overconfidence could lead to underestimation of investigative reach. The theory holds that attempts to manage evidence might inadvertently create new points of focus, such as an absence that appears deliberate. This interpretation remains a hypothesis grounded in behavioral analysis rather than direct evidence. Given the documented facts and the interpretive role of specialized knowledge, what do you think carries greater weight? The actions themselves or the context provided by academic exposure that may have shaped those actions? The investigation into the November 13, 2022 homicides at the King Road residence did not rely on the condition of the Hyundai Elantra in isolation. Law enforcement agencies assembled a multi-layered evidentiary framework that combined DNA analysis, cell phone records, and extensive surveillance review. Central to this framework was a tan leather knife sheath recovered from the crime scene, positioned on a bed near one of the victims. Forensic testing identified a single-source male DNA profile on the snap of the sheath. Through genealogical comparison and subsequent direct sampling, this profile was associated with Bryan Kohberger. The DNA finding represented the only biological evidence recovered from the scene that was publicly linked to him, and was characterized in court filings as a significant element of probable cause. While the DNA on the sheath established a physical connection between Kohberger and an object left at the scene, it did not establish the timing or circumstances under which that DNA was deposited. The sheath itself was not recovered from his possession, and no blood or victim DNA was publicly reported as being found on his person, clothing, or vehicle. Defense challenges emphasized that transfer could have occurred through secondary means, and that the DNA evidence standing alone did not reconstruct the sequence of events. This created a contradiction between the strength of the association and the limits of what that association could conclusively prove. How should a single-source DNA finding be weighed when other expected forensic links are absent? Does the presence of DNA on an item at the scene outweigh the absence of corroborating biological evidence elsewhere, or does it require additional contextual support to establish relevance? Investigators sought that contextual support through digital and visual data. Cell phone records obtained via search warrants indicated that a phone attributed to Kohberger was present in the general area of the King Road residence on multiple occasions in the months preceding November 13th, often during late night or early morning hours. On the night of the homicides, the phone was documented as active near his Pullman, Washington residence until approximately 2:42 a.m., whereafter it ceased communicating with the network at 2:47 a.m. The phone remained inactive until 4:48 a.m., when it reconnected south of Moscow, Idaho. This window overlapped with the estimated time of the homicides as determined by investigators. The pattern of activity before and after the gap was interpreted as movement consistent with travel between Pullman and Moscow. Surveillance footage from multiple locations captured a white sedan consistent with a Hyundai Elantra traveling in the vicinity of the King Road residence during the early morning hours. The vehicle was observed making several passes through the neighborhood before 4:04 a.m. and departing at approximately 4:20 a.m. at a higher rate of speed. Additional cameras captured the vehicle on routes leading away from Moscow towards Pullman. Analysts compared vehicle characteristics, including body style and lighting configuration, to registered vehicles and narrowed the field to a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra registered to Kohberger. The lack of a front license plate, consistent with Pennsylvania registration requirements, was cited as a factor for why plates were not visible on footage. The surveillance footage did not provide a clear view of the driver, nor did it capture a license plate number. Vehicle identification relied on a combination of make, model, year range, and movement patterns rather than unique identifiers. Defense arguments highlighted the prevalence of similar vehicles and the initial misidentification of the model year range in public requests for information. This raised questions about the degree of certainty that could be attributed to vehicle identification solely based on video analysis.
To what extent can circumstantial alignment between a registered vehicle and surveillance footage support an inference of presence? Does consistency across multiple cameras compensate for the absence of direct visual identification? The investigative pattern emphasized convergence. The DNA on the knife sheath placed a genetic marker at the scene. The cell phone data suggested repeated proximity to the location and a period of inactivity during the relevant time frame. The surveillance footage depicted a vehicle matching the description of Kohberger's Elantra, moving in a manner consistent with arrival and departure. When considered together, these elements formed a narrative of approach, presence, and exit. Each component, while limited on its own, was positioned to reinforce the others. Additional corroborative details included records showing that Kohberger had changed the registration of his vehicle shortly after the homicides, replacing Pennsylvania plates with Washington plates. Investigators also documented indirect travel routes following the event, inferred from cell phone pings and camera locations, which avoided major highways. These details were presented as consistent with an effort to limit visibility rather than as definitive proof of intent. None of these actions were unlawful in themselves. Changing vehicle registration and selecting alternate routes are legal activities with benign explanations. The contradiction lay in interpretation, whether these actions were coincidental or indicative of risk awareness. Defense filings underscored the danger of attributing criminal significance to lawful conduct absent direct evidence of wrongdoing. How should lawful but contextually suggestive behavior be evaluated? At what point does pattern recognition cross into speculative inference? Investigators integrated temporal sequencing into their analysis. The timeline established by digital records was aligned with surveillance timestamps and estimated time of death. This chronological framing reduced the likelihood that each data point was independent. The patterns suggested coordination across domains: physical movement, digital presence, and post-event behavior. The Hyundai Elantra's forensic condition was then interpreted within this integrated timeline, not as standalone evidence, but as part of a continuum. Based on the assembled evidence, it is possible that the vehicle served as the connective medium linking physical, digital, and behavioral data. The theory holds that the absence of trace evidence in the Elantra gains significance only when viewed alongside DNA recovered at the scene and digital indicators of movement. In this view, the vehicle's condition does not prove involvement, but could reflect post-event conduct informed by awareness of investigative methods. Alternatively, it remains possible that the convergence of data reflects coincidental overlap rather than coordinated action, and that each evidentiary strand requires independent validation. Investigators also relied on historical cell site location information to establish patterns of movement over time. While such data provides approximate location rather than precise positioning, its value lies in consistency across multiple events. Public filings acknowledge the limitations of this data, noting that it cannot pinpoint exact addresses and must be interpreted cautiously. The inherent imprecision of cell phone location data introduces uncertainty. Signal strength can be influenced by network load, terrain, and tower configuration. This limitation complicates efforts to draw definitive conclusions about presence at specific locations.
Does the accumulation of approximate data points create clarity, or does it amplify uncertainty? How should evidentiary thresholds be applied when precision varies across sources? Investigative approach treated corroboration as cumulative rather than additive. Each piece of evidence was evaluated for how it aligned temporally and contextually with others. The pattern did not seek to eliminate all alternative explanations, but to assess relative probability. It is likely that prosecutors will argue that the convergence of DNA, phone data, and surveillance footage reduces the plausibility of coincidence. The defense is expected to counter that convergence does not equal causation and that gaps remain. The theory remains contingent on interpretation rather than definitive proof. When the DNA, phone data, and surveillance footage are viewed together rather than separately, what do you think carries more weight? The strength of convergence or the persistence of gaps that prevent a complete reconstruction of events? Public records and court filings establish that Bryan Kohberger was a doctoral student in criminology at the Idaho homicides. His academic focus included criminal behavior, decision-making, and investigative processes. Investigators documented that after the murders, the Hyundai Elantra linked to him showed signs of intensive cleaning, though no victim DNA was publicly disclosed as being recovered from the vehicle. Additionally, digital records indicated patterns of late-night movement, repeated proximity to the crime area before the incident, and behavioral changes afterwards, such as altered routines and vehicle registration updates. These facts do not describe motive or intent. They describe background, capability, and observable actions before and after the crime window. At the same time, expertise in criminology does not equate to criminal behavior. Many students study crime without engaging in it. Cleaning a car, changing plates, or modifying routines are not illegal acts and can have innocent explanations. No diary, confession, or direct psychological assessment has been presented publicly to confirm an obsessive or guilty mindset. This contradiction creates tension. Investigators interpret patterns as psychologically meaningful, while the defense frames them as ordinary behaviors filtered through hindsight. How do we responsibly interpret behavior when the subject understands the system judging him? Does knowledge of criminology make certain actions more suspicious, or does it make investigators more likely to overinterpret neutral behavior as calculated?
What draws attention is not any single action, but the consistency of behavior across domains. Preparation knowledge, academic immersion in criminology and forensic theory, movement patterns, repeated late-night travel consistent over months, post-event conduct, intensive vehicle cleaning and altered logistics, silence, no public emotional reaction, no visible panic, no explanatory narrative. Psychologists often caution against profile bias, yet patterns matter when they repeat across time and context. The Elantra, in this sense, becomes more than transportation. It becomes a behavioral artifact, an object acted upon with unusual focus. Investigators noted that the car was reportedly cleaned thoroughly, including interior surfaces. Court documents did not describe casual tidying, but emphasized deliberate attention. This was highlighted not as proof of guilt, but as behavior occurring shortly after the crime timeline. At the same time, no forensic evidence publicly confirmed that the car ever contained victim traces from the victims. If the car held no victim evidence, then why clean it so intensely? Conversely, if it once contained evidence, why was none recoverable? This contradiction sits at the center of the psychological debate. Either the cleaning was unnecessary, or it was informed by fear of detection rather than actual contamination. Was the cleaning driven by reality or perception? Can fear alone motivate extreme behavior even when no physical evidence exists? Criminological literature often discusses cognitive overconfidence, the belief that one understands systems so well that they can outmaneuver them. In some cases, this leads not to recklessness, but to overcorrection.
Patterns consistent with this concept include excessive precaution beyond practical necessity, hyperfocus on forensic vulnerabilities, actions taken just in case rather than in response to known threats. The Elantra's condition may reflect this pattern, not the removal of evidence, but the removal of imagined evidence. Based on the evidence, it is possible that Kohberger's academic background shaped how he interpreted risk. Rather than responding to what was actually present, he might have been responding to what could be present. The cleaning of the vehicle could reflect anticipatory anxiety informed by criminological knowledge, an awareness of trace transfer, secondary DNA, and forensic scrutiny. It is also possible that repeated exposure to violent case studies fostered a sense of detachment, where actions are treated as procedural rather than emotional. In that framework, the car becomes a variable to control, not a reminder of human loss. Importantly, this theory does not require guilt. It suggests a mindset shaped by education, stress, and perceived threat rather than confirmed involvement. Observers have noted the absence of visible emotional expression in public appearances. While demeanor is not evidence, courts often acknowledge that post-event behavior can influence perception. However, psychological experts caution that affect varies widely among individuals and cannot reliably indicate guilt or innocence. A flat affect can signal many things: shock, anxiety, neurodivergence, or strategic restraint. The contradiction lies in interpretation, whether silence is read as calculation or as self-preservation under intense scrutiny. When someone understands how behavior is analyzed, do they suppress emotion, or does that suppression itself become suspect? Across criminology cases, individuals with system-level knowledge often exhibit one of two: overconfidence or hypervigilance. The evidence here leans toward the latter. There is no public indication of boasting, taunting, or thrill-seeking behavior. Instead, there is withdrawal, routine modification, and apparent risk management. These are not the patterns of someone seeking recognition. They are patterns of someone attempting to disappear into normalcy. It is likely that the psychological weight of knowledge played a role. Understanding how crimes are solved can magnify fear, not reduce it. The car, repeatedly referenced across the investigation, may symbolize that fear, a mobile space perceived as vulnerable to scrutiny. This does not prove action, it suggests internal pressure. In the end, the Hyundai Elantra is not just a piece of evidence, it is a mirror. Investigators see potential movement and concealment. The defense sees assumption and projection. The public sees a blank space filled with meaning. What remains haunting is not what was found, but what wasn't. No blood, no fibers, no clear answers. Just patterns circling an absence. And sometimes, absence speaks loudest.
When you look at the car, the cleaning, the silence, and the knowledge behind it all, do you see calculated guilt or a mind overwhelmed by what could happen next? As the investigation stands publicly, the Hyundai Elantra remains one of the most scrutinized objects in the case. Court records and reporting confirm that it was seized, examined, and heavily discussed, but did not yield the kind of dramatic forensic evidence many expected. At the same time, Bryan Kohberger faces the most severe legal consequences possible, including life imprisonment if convicted. The case has moved from investigation to adjudication, where facts, not speculation, will ultimately decide outcomes. Yet the contradiction remains unresolved. How can a vehicle allegedly central to a crime narrative reveal so little? In cases involving extreme violence, absence of physical evidence often feels counterintuitive. Viewers expect blood, DNA, or a clear forensic trail. Instead, the Elantra offers silence. No public confirmation of victim DNA, no definitive proof of what happened inside that space.
This gap between expectation and reality is where debate thrives. Can silence itself become evidence, or does treating absence as meaning risk turning theory into assumption? Across modern criminal cases, investigators increasingly rely on convergence rather than a single smoking gun. Vehicles, phones, timelines, and behavior are analyzed together. Individually, each element may appear weak. Collectively, they form a narrative structure. The Elantra fits that pattern, not as proof alone, but as a connecting thread between movements, timing, and post-event actions. Based on the evidence, it is possible that the car functions less as a container of forensic truth and more as a behavioral signal. The attention given to it by investigators, analysts, and the public may reflect how modern cases are built through inference, context, and pattern recognition. The Elantra could represent perceived control, perceived risk, or perceived exposure rather than confirmed activity. Its role may ultimately be symbolic, not physical. And now, the final question is yours. Do you see the Elantra as a silent confession or as a blank canvas onto which meaning has been projected? If you want deeper, evidence-based breakdowns of real cases, without hype, without assumptions, subscribe to the channel, share your perspective in the comments, and stay with us as we continue to follow the truth wherever it leads.